All right, here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Non-Victim Nation podcast. Today I am joined by Matt Vanderhart, who just told me a very interesting story, or kind of a fact about the name itself, that you trace back to, is it Holland?
Yes.
Do you mind repeating that? 'Cause that was really
Yeah.
interesting.
And so, if you meet any other Vanderharts in the U.S., we
Hmm.
are all related. When I go to an event, a lot of times I tell
Yeah,
people, I'm Matt Vanderhart. You know, looking up, and I'm like, I'm the only one. So there's no other Vanderharts. I'm confident there's no other Vanderharts in your scroll.
right.
Unless my brother happens to be at the same.
Hmm.
But we are all traced back. We can trace our lineage all the way back to when that first family came to the US
Hmm.
from Holland. So that put me under pressure. But so my grandpa, it would have been my grandpa's grandpa
Okay,
that migrated here. And I'm
nice.
not sure the year, but early 1900s.
Right.
And come from a long line of farmers.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I just thought that was really cool. It was like the idea that like anybody that you ever meet in the country that has that name is actually related to you.
yes. Yeah.
So I don't know anybody else that could probably say that,
Yeah. I
you
know
know.
there is one other Matthew in the
Uh-huh.
family.
Right.
Like we're all Christians for the most part. So
Uh-huh.
like there's a lot of Matthews and Johns and Lukes and
Right. Right.
yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So
And then you are actually the owner of Range is 2131,
yes.
and you also have your brother Scott who runs the Sword and Trowel training company.
Yeah.
Okay,
So my brother-in-law, so
brother-in-law.
he's my wife's brother. And yeah, he started Sword and Trowel
Hmm.
training company, and it's you know, train to live to build's motto. And it's emphasis on being prepared and training, but also with a bigger purpose of, hey, you're living a life with purpose,
Right.
kind of like we talked about earlier. And yeah, it's
Hmm.
gonna be we're just getting started. Like I think he's got 3 dates,
Okay.
and I can share those links with you. He's got 3 dates on the books right now, and just doing like pistol one,
Hmm.
kind of getting people started. That's kind of our taking the average citizen and really starting their journey of being prepared and equipped.
Right.
So
And then when you and I kind of were first in contact, you sent me like an information segment about the range,
yeah,
right? And the thing that stuck out was that in the very first sentence that you were unapologetically Christian,
yes,
and I really found that to be interesting. And even though I'm not a religious person, I
yeah,
fully understand the value of that
sure,
and why it's important, And I
hmm,
think as a country, we've moved so far away from
yeah,
that in too many ways that we really need to find our way back to it. So the fact that you put that out there, like right first in front,
yeah,
that's a big deal.
yeah. So like I I want to say this carefully
Okay.
because I don't want to like immediately piss off a bunch of potential clients, right?
Right.
But I don't need this business.
Right.
Like I was doing fine. Like I've made less money since starting the range project,
Okay.
right? Because I spend all my indispensable income on building a range.
Right.
Like I think just rough numbers, I think I'm like 20 grand into it,
Uh-huh.
and I've made $100 so far.
Right.
you know? So like I don't need this business. I
Mhm.
wanted a range for
Uh-huh.
myself.
Okay.
Like I wanted a range that I could go shoot at. I could have whoever I wanted to shoot there, and nobody's going to tell me no.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted.
Uh-huh.
Well, then I start realizing there's a huge need
Hmm.
for for it in the community, right?
Right.
But as I kind of thought about this, I'm like, well, at some point, I'm not going to be able to keep my mouth shut on what's really important to me. Like we talked about earlier, what's that purpose in your life?
Hmm.
My purpose isn't to run a range.
Hmm.
Like that's one of the things I do.
Right.
I want to help. I want to serve the community
Hmm.
in that way. I don't need to do it. So if somebody's like, "Well, I'm not using your range because you're a Christian." Okay,
Okay.
great.
Yeah.
Go use Ben Avery,
Hmm.
And so like I was going to come out of the gate with that. Like, I'm unapologetically Christian.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not going to browbeat you. I'm not going to, you know, dunk you in confessional or whatever, some of the crazy things happen.
Yeah.
Like, but I am going to be who I am
There's not a bunch
right
of
out of the gate, you know, um, take it or leave it,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I've always lived my life.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not going to change now, you
Right.
know?
No, like I said, I think that there's a lot of value in that. I think that not enough people of whatever, I wouldn't say any religion, but like the Christian faith in general seem to have like taken a step back. It's like they're no longer really standing out and saying, yes, this is what we believe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's fear of backlash of
It's
like,
fear of man.
you know,
It's fear of man.
yeah.
It's, yeah. Or
So,
they don't really believe what they say they believe.
mhm,
It's one of the two. And I
right.
mean, the Bible's repeatedly says not to fear man. So that's an innate that's an innate thing that all human beings are going to deal with is
Hmm.
the fear of man. Like, if I say the wrong thing, who's going to be offended?
Right.
And I'm grateful for the privileges that God has given me through what our family's been involved with, ag and different stuff that I've never had to work for a boss that was like, well, if you say this, you're going to be fired, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's given me maybe helped me get grounded.
Hmm.
But then I look back to like when I was in junior high.
Hmm.
I'm like, I would say what I believed in junior high, regardless of whether my friends like me or not, you
Right.
know? So I'm like, I think I probably would have been okay. I probably would have got fired
Right.
because I'm gonna say what I believe,
Yeah.
regardless of who is there to put me down,
Yeah.
like so I know that's a very broad answer, but
Yeah.
I believe in saying what's right, regardless of
Hmm.
if anybody agrees with me or if they like me for it.
Hmm. So, kind of on that note, we had talked about this previously too, that you've done public speaking,
Yeah.
not necessarily about that per se, but that is part of the things
Yes.
that you talk about. Can you go into a little bit more of that?
So I grew up in a very small, um, you've probably never even heard of it, uh, type of church.
Hmm.
Um, there's three in the Phoenix area. Um, and there's no pastor per se.
Okay.
There's a body of elders, and then like every man had the opportunity, if they felt God had equipped them with that, to take part in public teaching or preaching of the gospel. And the gospel is basically Jesus is the Christ. Jesus is the Savior of the world.
Right.
And so I I was I would say I was pretty good at that. You
Hmm.
know, I'm not so much a teacher as in like breaking down the Bible in it, consecutive order and teaching that way. I do find in teaching I'm a little bit I go a little bit more topical.
Hmm.
So like you give me a topic, I'll dig into that topic and I can run with that. Um so I've spoken before audiences. I've done outreach in my community. We've had what we called gospel meetings. You just basically get people together for an hour and,
Hmm.
you know, you sing some songs and you tell them about Jesus.
Right.
And so I've done some of that. Um, but it never really, like, God never really gave me that as a, hey, this is where you're going.
Hmm.
Right. And it was just till recently I really felt God telling me you need to build up men.
Hmm.
Obviously, start with your sons.
Hmm.
Build up men to be confident, to know who they are, not just who they are before other men, because I find a lot of men, that's what we do is we compare ourselves to other men.
Hmm.
We use, the woman we have or the car we drive or the job we do or the job we've done in the past.
Right.
And that's how we value ourselves. And until we understand our value before God, our true father,
Hmm.
and look for our validation in that, we're going to constantly be struggling. And there's a book that really helped me with that. And it's called Wild at Heart.
Okay.
And that that kind of put me on the track. Like I knew a lot of those things,
Mhm.
but that like helped me lay them out in an order, right?
Right.
And so I went through a period after kind of leaving that church because God, the closest one to us is I-17 in Glendale.
Okay.
So we were driving like an hour to church
Mhm.
every day. And for many years, my wife and I were just like, we feel like God is calling us to fellowship in our community.
Mhm.
And that's what one of the reasons why we did the outreach work. Maybe God wants us to start a church, you know?
Right.
And that wasn't his will. I mean, we
Mhm.
did the work and we saw a blessing. But then when it came to like, well, should we start a church?
Mhm.
We felt like God was telling us, not right now, not now.
Right.
So we like, okay, well, we'll transition, and we've kind of moved between those different ones in the city,
Mhm.
and at every time we felt like God was telling us, no, Cotton Picking, would you listen to me? Like, go in your community and fellowship there. So last year we did.
Mhm.
We well, I guess it's still this year,
Mhm.
early this spring, we
Right.
made that move, and we go to Southwest Calvary in Buckeye, and there, it's very all the belief systems are the same, the foundation is the same,
Mhm.
mode of operation is different. Like there's a main pastor that does the bulk of the teaching. He's got his group of advisors, or elders around him that he looks to for counsel. Like, hey, where do we need to kind of focus? Who needs help? Where are we going to go with this? And then there's some junior pastors that kind of lead up the high school or the junior high or the children's ministry and that kind of stuff. And so there wasn't that same opportunity to just, hey, I'll take this Sunday. I'll preach this Sunday.
Right.
And again, like we talked about, I'm not the type of person that's going to be go up to the pastor and be like, hey, I want to take a Sunday.
Right.
Um, because I feel like that's me putting myself forward,
Mhm.
and Jesus said, hey, don't do that.
Mhm.
Like, go sit in the back.
Right.
And if somebody's like, hey, I know him, he could help us. Okay, sure. I'm willing, but I'm
Mhm.
not I'm not going to put myself forward in that way. And so I struggled. I was like, well, God, I know what you've given me.
Mhm.
And like not too long after we made that switch, I felt God telling me, prepare a message. And I was like, why? Like, where am I going to give this? And
Right.
it was like, I'll, I'll tell you that later,
Mhm.
but prepare a message. So I did. And I kept like looking for opportunities like, well, maybe this is it, or maybe
Mhm.
that is it. Maybe, nope. Okay. Nope. All right. All right, God, where do you want me to give this? Like, where do you want me to engage the public
Mhm.
in with this message? And up to this point, I've never been on social media.
Okay.
So I'm going to be 40 in November.
Okay.
Never been on social media to date. And but I've had like people tell me like, man, YouTube, social media is like the tent meetings, the revival meetings of the 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, like where
Right.
you'd go into a town, you'd set up a tent, you'd put out a sign and be like, be here at 7,
Right.
and the place would be jammed because
Mhm.
people didn't have anything to do.
Yeah.
Like, not every town had a movie theater and not everybody had a stinking phone in their face all the time.
Right.
So it was like an event.
Mhm.
Well, people would hear and be like convicted. Like the Holy Spirit, the word of God will convict you if you put it into your heart, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm like, I don't want to do social media. Like it's not my thing.
Yeah.
I hate it. It's the devil's playground, right? And but God was like, but I want you to do it. No, but I don't want to.
Right.
And so it kind of a funny story. I told God, I was like, I'm gonna ask 4 of my close buddies that I would go to for counsel
Hmm.
that have some understanding of that world, like the tech world, like social media and etc. Hey, do you think I would be a good fit? Like, do you think I should even pursue this, or if this is an immediate no,
Hmm.
like I told God, if any of my those 4 guys,
Hmm.
and my wife obviously being on that team, if any of them say no, I don't think you should do it, I'm not doing it.
Right.
I was like, I was putting the fleece out. I don't know if you're familiar with the Old Testament story of Gideon.
Uh,
God wanted him to go attack um, this giant army with 300 men.
okay.
And he's like, but I don't want to. And he's like, well, but if I put fleece out, a lambskin
Uh-huh.
with the wool still on,
Mhm.
I put that out and it's soaking wet and the ground is dry, then I know that that's what you want me to do. So he went out the next morning, fleece was soaking wet and the ground was dry. He's like, but I'm not sure. So this time you make the ground soaking wet and the fleece dry, and then I'll know for sure. He came out the next morning, the ground was soaking wet, the fleece was dry.
Right.
He's like, okay, I guess I'll do this.
Yeah.
So if you hear Christians talk about I fleeced it or I put the fleece out, that's what they're referring to is, hey, I feel like you're telling me this, God,
Hmm.
but can you do a situation that I as a human being can fully grasp,
Right.
that without God doing this, this is impossible? Then I'll know.
Right.
So that was me putting the fleece out. And all of my buddies and my wife were like, yeah, we've known you should probably do this for a long time. And I was like, come on, I wanted somebody to say no, you know?
Hook
So
me up, people.
yeah. So
Mhm.
I opened one Sunday, Scott came out
Mhm.
because he'd been on social media. I was like, hey, help me get set up. So he set up a Instagram and a X account,
Mhm.
and we're probably gonna set up um,
YouTube.
a YouTube and
Right.
likely a Rumble
Mhm.
because YouTube eventually is going to kick us off because the things I say.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. They've been tightening down on their policies of have pretty much anything that has to do with
yeah,
guns.
guns, yeah,
Yeah.
or I think even religion. Especially when you say, okay, the religion,
Hmm.
the the truths of the Bible affect how I live. They
Hmm.
really don't want that
Right.
because then you're going to start preaching against
Hmm.
the evils that are
Right.
happening in our world.
The thing that gets me is that the evils that are happening in the world are the things that they're trying to replace religion with.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they're
absolutely.
the whole ideology of, your skin color and who you want to sleep with is way more important than your religious or your personal convictions
Yeah,
and,
or what's
a
right.
meritocracy.
Yeah,
You know, and again, even though I'm not a religious person, I understand that this country was built on Judeo-Christian
yeah,
principles, right?
and it
You
doesn't
know,
work with any other system.
right.
Yeah,
It was built for a Christian believing
mhm,
society, and when you move away from that, it falls apart,
it does.
and that's where we're at
We're
now.
seeing it. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
again, I don't know my Bible that well, but if you think about the Jews when they fled, you know, and they were left to their own devices, they came up with all kinds of things that, they
yeah,
decided this was a good idea. And it took, Moses going up in the mountain and saying, no, no, this is the word
yeah,
of God. You need to stop all of that and
yeah,
come back to faith
yeah.
and start acting right again.
Well, part of that was the culture they were in, right? The
Hmm.
Egyptian culture was wild,
Yeah.
perverse.
Hmm.
They were doing everything.
Right.
The stuff we're doing now. Like I don't know if you've ever listened to any of Mark Driscoll's.
Mhm.
He's a pastor at Trinity Church,
Okay.
and I don't agree with him on everything,
Hmm.
but he did a series on judges, and he talked about like Elisha and Jezebel and Ahab.
Okay.
So Ahab and Jezebel, Ahab was a king, Jezebel was his queen, Elisha was a prophet of God,
Hmm.
and they would literally worship Baal through orgies. Well,
Okay.
then back then kids would be born
Yeah.
because you can't have sex without
Right.
making babies.
Hmm.
And then they would take the babies and throw them into the fire to worship Ashtaroth.
Mhm.
See the connection?
Yeah.
Like that's what we're doing today.
Right.
We want to have sex with whoever we want to have sex with, and then the consequences are babies,
Mhm.
and we're like, ah, let's just offer them up for sexual convenience.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
the you can't read that and be like not see the comparison.
Mhm.
Like we're literally doing child sacrifice for
Yeah.
sexual convenience. Like
Yeah. One of the things that
crazy.
that really wraps me around the axle is the fact that they call that a form of healthcare, and it
Yeah.
simply is not.
No.
They call it women's reproductive reproductive rights, but it's also something else. And it's
Reproductive
like
health.
reproductive health.
Yeah.
It's like,
No.
no, that's
That's yeah.
anti-reproductive.
Yeah.
You're,
Anti-reproductive and anti-health.
yeah,
Like how is that healthy?
you know. So
Yeah.
you asked me a question earlier. If you look around, like what are the things that you see, or like what's kind of the biggest thing you see? And it took me a second to kind of like filter through that and like because I got a long list of things that bother me. Okay, but the one that really really stands out is my first impulse was to say lack of integrity because there's a severe
Yeah.
lack of that, right?
Sure.
But honestly, it's the lack of accountability for anything.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be held accountable for any of their actions, right?
Hmm.
They want to be judged by their intentions, but not their actual outcomes,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, the people that are out there having sex, and not that this is totally all on women because men have a
No,
part to play
yeah.
in it too,
Men
right?
have the biggest share
Yeah.
of responsibility.
But,
Yeah.
they talk about, people who want to enforce different abortion laws and things like that is they're limiting women's reproductive health. And it's
Yeah.
like, how about you take responsibility
For
and
your own
keep your damn
actions.
legs
Yeah.
closed? How about you not be out there just having sex,
Yeah.
and not using protection, not doing all the things you should be doing, you
Yeah.
know? How about you have a solid relationship with a person?
Yeah. You
There's
mean
so
being
much,
monogamous?
yeah,
Like,
you
come
know,
on, dude.
it's a lot to ask, I know. But, it's like you're causing this is a self-generated issue
Yeah.
and you're trying to hold everybody else accountable for it,
Yeah.
except the one person who really is
Yeah.
responsible, and that's you.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned people they say they want to be judged by their intentions and not by their actions,
Hmm.
which there's a verse in the Bible that says, judge lest you be judged. Like
Hmm.
judge not lest you be judged.
Hmm.
Well, that's not talking about actions. In the context, it's talking about don't judge intentions.
Hmm.
So I can come on your show and I can say things and you can be like, oh, okay, he said what he said. And then maybe later or somebody else, somebody's going to, anybody that listens to your podcast be like, oh, he's got ulterior motives of why he said what he said.
Right.
You can't judge that. Nobody can judge that. Nobody can judge my heart.
Right.
What they can judge is what I do.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to get back to is judging what we do,
Hmm.
not judging my intentions.
Right.
Because me as a man, you as a man, any other man
Hmm.
cannot look into anybody else's heart and be like, this is why he did what he did.
Hmm.
No. All you can do is judge me by my actions. I don't know if you saw it, but I posted last week on Instagram that even a child,
Hmm.
some scriptures, even a child is known by his actions, whether they be good or whether they be bad.
Right.
Well, child is innocent
Yeah.
for the most part. They're innocent to why they do what they do.
Hmm.
Their mind isn't fully developed. They can't even make a good reason for why did you hit your brother? I mean, I've got 4 kids. Okay. I'm pretty good at understanding
Right.
children at this stage of the game.
Right.
They can't be like, I don't know. They can't even tell you why.
Right.
But what you can do is judge what they do
Yeah.
and be like, hey, dude, that's not right.
Hmm.
Or like my boys are boys. They're all
Hmm.
boys. Just a quick story. They're irritated that they're going around, their brothers going around smacking them on the butt, you know? Well, they're boys. They're gonna, hey, they're a butt's hanging out, we're gonna smack it, you know? Well, I'm like, all right, here's the deal.
Right.
You smack your brother's butt for no reason. He gets to hit you and you can't retaliate. That's the deal.
Okay.
You know?
Right.
And like, hey, I don't know why you did what you did, but here's the action.
Yeah.
You hit him
Uh-huh.
for no reason. then he gets to punch you and you don't get to retaliate.
Right. Called
Yeah,
consequences.
it's consequences for your actions. Like,
Right.
and there's no better time to learn that when you're 9 to 13, because once you hit puberty and the muscles start getting bigger, things are getting broken, and
Right.
it's probably going to be you.
Yeah. Right.
You know? So, yeah, that's my parenting philosophy for
Well,
boys
it's
anyway.
again, a lot of the things, and I'm going to blame a lot of this on single mothers raising children, but especially boys. It's like you do not know how to raise
Yeah,
boys.
they don't.
That's not always the case. There are exceptions to that.
Very few.
By and large, they uh it isn't that they're bad parents. It's not that they have bad
No,
intentions. It's
no,
just that
they don't know. They never
they
were a
don't
boy.
understand. It's like a
Yeah.
you know bird can't teach a fish to fly. It just
Mm-mm.
doesn't work that way. They're completely different mindsets in the way they
Yeah.
understand things. Like I used to study psychology, right? And I watched this video where they took like a little child gate, like a baby gate, right? And they put it up and they put the baby on one side, and then the mother would go sit in a chair, right? And so, and just to see kind of like what reactions they would get, right? Boys would, without fail, try to like look for ways either to get around or through that gate to get to their mother,
Mm-hmm.
right? They pull on it, they try to climb over it, they look for ways around it. They're problem
Through it.
solving,
Yeah.
right? They're going to figure out how to get from here to there,
Yeah.
right? Girls, by and large, almost without fail, their solution is to sit down and cry,
Right.
and the mother
Yeah.
will come to them,
Yeah.
right? Who completely different
Yes.
mindsets, and that's as children. That's
Yeah.
like it's a core part of us as
Yeah.
human beings. It's
Yeah.
like you're not going to change that,
No, you're
right?
not.
And trying to raise a boy to be a girl, which is again, that's a whole other thing.
Asinine.
You know,
Yeah.
that doesn't work. At some point, something's going to break,
Yeah.
and we're seeing that over and
Oh,
over again.
yes.
You know, in our
Yes.
society, it doesn't
Yeah.
work.
So I want to go back to your opening of that is you put that on single mothers, and I know where you're coming from, but my thing is it's on the men.
Yeah.
Like, every problem in this country right now
Mhm.
is on us men. Maybe not us because we weren't the ones that initiated it, but man, we're the ones that can fix it.
Right.
And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We have got to start saying what's right.
Hmm.
Like, no matter who it pisses off, no matter what opportunities it races for us, no matter how it affects our earning ability or our job, if we don't start standing up and saying what's right, the women aren't. We can't put it on women. It's not their job.
Hmm.
And like, why? Like, our society has made it where single mothers get incentivized,
Yes,
right?
they
And
do.
that's wrong.
Hmm.
So we're working with a broken system.
Hmm.
Men are working with a broken system. But like what you said about boys, we are problem solvers.
Hmm.
Let's work with the broken system
Hmm.
and let's solve the problem.
Right.
And that's hard. That's going to be very hard. But whether it's firearms, whether it's agriculture, whether it's automobiles,
Hmm.
we'll throw ourselves into solving a problem with one of those,
Hmm.
like up to our ears till we drown in it.
Right.
But what about our real purpose in life to
Hmm.
be protectors of society,
Right.
you know?
Hmm.
And we've got to start doing that.
Hmm.
So any like I get it. Like, the women have a fair amount of responsibility.
Hmm.
The feminists are off the rails,
Yeah.
right? Like, I feel very sorry. I feel very bad
Hmm.
for guys that are early to mid 20s,
Hmm.
maybe pushing 30, trying to find a wife today.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, the only place that I would even begin to look is in church.
Right.
Like, whether you're religious or not, you probably should get, you should probably find some foundation there, because that's really the only foundation,
Right.
in my opinion, that you
Hmm.
can get is, hey, the guy that made us probably has the answers,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like, he gave us a field manual
Hmm.
for life. We should probably check it out.
Right.
And man, I feel sorry for guys. Like, I often run that in my scenario. Like, what happens if my wife dies?
Mhm.
Like, I've got 4 kids, 3 or 4 businesses. Like,
Yeah.
and she helps me run them immensely. Like,
Mhm.
I can't do it on my own. Like,
Right.
what happens if she gets in a car accident or God forbid, she gets sick or something?
Uh-huh.
How in the world would I go about finding a replacement,
Right.
another partner that is going to help me, is
Mhm.
going to love my kids, going to help me raise my kids, going to help me run my businesses? It's daunting. I can't even begin to like
Right.
play war game that scenario.
Yeah.
And then my immediate thought is, well, what about guys that don't have a wife, and
Yeah.
they're looking for one
Mhm.
in this world? It is messed up,
Yes, it
you
is.
know? And I'm just like, wow, it's crazy. So the women bear some responsibility,
Mhm.
right? But if you boil it all the way back,
Mhm.
I believe the feminist movement was likely started by men who just wanted women to be promiscuous
Okay.
and get what they just wanted free, easy sex, you know? And I mean, and that's where we're at today. Like women are like, well, if men can do just whoever they want, then we should be able to do that too.
Right.
So it's like the men that started the feminist movement,
Mhm.
and I haven't looked into it, but in my gut, I would say if you look back far enough, it was
Mhm.
probably started by men
Right.
to say, hey, we want to get the women broke down enough so that we can just do it with whoever we want to, whenever we want to. And they and and it'll be their idea, you know? So
Right.
like we have a responsibility to fix that
Yeah.
and to start. And I think you are starting to see a little bit of a change because dudes are like, hey, you're cute, like you look really good.
Uh-huh.
How many men have you been with? They're like, oh, I've been with 12. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Do you have OnlyFans? Do you have, you know, like who else are you sharing what I want to be only mine? Who else are you sharing that with?
Right.
Oh, I've been with whatever,
Yeah.
and the numbers, like before I got on social media, I had a better view of society. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Like the people that will follow you and just like want to send you pictures of themselves. I'm like,
Mhm.
why?
Yeah.
Like I understand. I have a deep understanding of why, but we go into that later. But like, I think as men, we have a responsibility to say no.
Yeah.
Like even those women that are coming on, be like, hey, I don't want that because it's not good for you.
Mhm.
It's ruining your soul every
Right.
time. Like uh, a buddy of mine had a Sunday school teacher that took a ro- took a took the group of girls in the Sunday school, teenage girls, and gave them all a rose.
Yeah.
And they're all cool. We got a rose. She's like, okay, now I want you to go around and talk to all the different guys. And every time you talk to one, you give them a petal off your rose.
Mhm.
And some of them went and talked to like two, three guys. Some of them went and talked to one and just kind of, maybe they're shy or whatever.
Yeah.
She's like, okay, now that's what it's like every time you're in a relationship, especially every time you have sex
Yeah.
with somebody else. You're giving them part of yourself that you're never going to get back.
Right.
And that made a profound effect on those girls. Now, some of them probably went ahead and, slept around anyway,
Yeah.
but at least they understood what they were doing.
Mhm.
I don't think too many people today understand that. But as men, we need to be able to be strong enough and say, "No, I respect you enough that I'm not going to take that piece of your soul
Mhm.
unless we're committed to one another."
Right.
Like we're in it for the long haul. And man, that's a tough place to be in our world today,
Yeah.
and I understand that, and
Mhm.
man, I was fortunate to grow up in church and to meet my wife in church, and we were each other's first boyfriend and girlfriend.
Right.
So I mean, dude, I understand that the world is broken and not everybody can go back and and make the choices that I did. And it's not because I was smart and wise. Like it was only by the grace of God
Mhm.
that's how my life turned out.
Right.
But that I still can't lower the standard
Mhm.
because the world is broken.
Right.
We've got to stay to the standard, you
Mhm.
know. And so I pity men that are looking for a good wife in our world today.
Yeah, I'm actually in
Yeah.
that camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey man, my heart goes out to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I've I'm more than happy to have a relationship. What I don't enjoy is the dating, especially now because of
Oh
all the
yeah.
social media and all the
Yeah.
games and everything. It's like I don't have time for that. If you like me, say so. If you don't like me, say so.
Yeah.
I don't really care one way or the other, you
And
know.
yeah.
If because it's the idea that people want to like play games and I know that that's kind of become a part of the culture now. You
Yeah.
can't just say, "Hey, I like you. Let's go." You know,
Yeah.
you have to go through all these things about, well, I'll call you in 3 days, and there's all these
Bullshit.
rules and games, and
Yeah.
I can't get into any of that.
Yeah.
You know,
Don't. Don't play the game.
yeah. And if somebody, like I said, if they don't like me, that's fine. I'm a pretty tough guy. I can
Yeah,
handle
I
it,
can
right?
handle it. Yeah.
You know, then I can hurt my feelings.
Not 15 anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go cry in the shower.
Yeah.
um, so it's just that lack of dishonesty and integrity and
Yeah.
just kind of everything that part of that.
For sure.
Kind of going back to the single mother thing, though, there's also another part of that uh, there are men who actually do want to be in part of
No,
their
I know.
children's
And
lives,
that's yeah,
and they're being prevented
pushed
from
out.
it,
Yeah.
because of a vindictive mother or because,
Feminist
you know,
movement.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I follow a guy on Instagram called Dad Talk,
Okay.
um, or it's Dad Talk Today. I can't remember which one, but he talks a lot about that. Like puts up statistics, the number of
Yeah.
people like in divorce, who don't have access to their children. And why should men have to fight so hard to have that right when it's their children too?
Yeah.
The judges and our society has just sort of put rules on this that the children automatically go with the women
Yeah.
without question, and that's really not the way it should be.
Yeah. No.
Keeping them away from their fathers is a large part of what's destroying our country.
Yes. Fatherlessness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think
So,
that goes back to our there has been a move by our government
mhm,
to subsidize single women.
right,
And like it's pushing that agenda
mhm,
to get fathers out of the home,
right,
you know, kind of conspiracy, but it's true.
hmm,
Like if there's strong men in the home, if there's strong fathers that teach their sons and daughters the right way to live,
hmm,
guess what? Guess who loses power?
the government.
The government.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, I think there's a deeper component, right? Because this isn't because it's not just in America. Like maybe it's worse in America,
hmm,
but you look in Europe, you look in other developed countries,
hmm,
and they're dealing with similar problems.
right,
So you have to take a step back and be like, okay, what's the deeper root?
hmm,
And from my worldview,
hmm,
it's the devil
right,
wanting to just he hates humanity. So he wants you to destroy yourself
hmm,
with whatever vice is appealing to you.
hmm,
He wants you to destroy yourself and think you're enjoying it.
right,
And that's where we're at. Like drugs, alcohol, women, men,
mhm,
you know, social media, all the things where you which may have their place.
hmm,
Like I don't have a problem with drinking some alcohol.
yeah,
I'm not going to use drugs, but hey, if you want to have some marijuana, knock yourself out.
right,
But when you go to that to hurt yourself,
hmm,
now you've crossed a line.
right,
Same with alcohol. Like
mm,
if you drink to the point where you're drunk and you're hurting yourself, you probably should you should probably look into that. Like
right,
what's really going on?
mhm,
And but the devil has got us all hoodwinked through society, through now social media. Like we talked about earlier, it's like the devil's playground.
right,
Like there's so much influence
mhm,
that, and he uses people who are hurting to hurt other people.
mhm,
We talked about OnlyFans, like
right,
the destruction that does to men,
mhm,
like the addiction
yeah,
is probably worse than drugs or alcohol. I think there's even stats
oh yeah,
now that are
that's
proving that, you
right,
know, and man, that's so destructive. Like
hmm,
Proverbs talks about Don't give your strength to women.
Okay.
Well, that when you're looking at pornography and you're beating off to it,
Right.
like you're giving your strength to that woman.
Mhm.
And what it's talking about is don't give your strength to women because then you don't have the strength you need to go stand for the things that you need to stand for as a man.
Right.
And what's interesting is if you do that enough,
Mhm.
you actually lose physical strength. Like you
Yeah.
lose your physical strength. Your testosterone goes in the basement. You you get overweight. You can't do the things that you could normally do.
Mhm.
And like we're seeing it so much in our world today.
Mhm.
And it's so sad, you
Right.
know? But it but how do we get that message out? How do we let people know? Because I think a lot of them do it in ignorance.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, this looks enjoyable. I'm going to chase it down,
Yeah.
and then the shame and the regret after is debilitating.
Mhm.
You know, so yeah, read the proverbs.
Right. Yeah, there's a component of that of doing something that doesn't seem like it's harming you or anybody else, right? And
Yeah,
you're doing it alone,
yeah,
right? And it doesn't have to be pornography, it could be alcohol, it could be
yeah,
drugs, it could be something else, okay? The idea that you're doing something that you don't believe is harming anybody else, and this is not a for sure thing, I'm like 100%, but like on some level, you're still harming people around you,
yeah,
right? So let's say somebody who's an alcoholic, right? They feel like they have it under control and they're drinking, and there's an outcome to that, whether it happens immediately or later on.
yeah.
Their health, the way that they treat people, the way that they deal with life itself,
Hmm.
they can fall into depression. There's like all manner of
Yeah,
things that could come from that behavior, right? And it's easy for somebody to sit and say, well, I'm not hurting anybody, I'm drinking, I'm taking the alcohol in, I'm only hurting myself,
yeah,
right? Okay, they're not understanding that like other people really are affected, because for you to say that you're only hurting yourself means that there isn't anybody else in the world that cares about you,
hmm,
right? So if I woke up one day and said, you know what, I'm going to chop my fingers off one at a time right in front of my family, you're telling me that yes, they're my fingers, I'm the one suffering the pain, that they're not going to be affected or harmed by that. You know, it's a ridiculous notion to really believe that that's the case.
yeah,
That's a pretty extreme example,
yeah,
but it's the same idea. It's like you are harming and affecting people around you, whether you know it or not,
yes,
you know?
yeah. And that's I'm looking up a scripture right now
Hmm.
that speaks to that. See if it my search app is not wanting to work, but basically that no one lives to themselves, no one dies to themselves.
Hmm.
And we think, well, I can do it as long as nobody else gets hurt.
Yeah.
That's impossible. It's flat out impossible.
Right.
Like you're going to hurt yourself and you're going to hurt others around you because you're losing your ability. It's basically self control,
Hmm.
you know? And I believe like the New Testament talks about the fruits of the spirit:
Hmm.
love, joy, peace, long suffering, self control. There's, I think, I don't exactly remember how many there is, but those are some of them. And self control is, I believe, is the last one that's mentioned.
Hmm.
And when we when we give into that, we lose our ability little by little to self control.
Hmm.
And man, we're seeing that play out,
Right.
you know, in a huge way.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
Uh, Another thing, kind of adding to that, is that I believe that the Creator made us, and we are not meant to be alone.
Yeah,
There's no part of us that's meant
I
to
know
like
where that
be
one's at.
100% isolated, you know?
Yeah,
And to live a life in isolation means you're harming yourself in some way, you know?
yeah. Well, God made us relation. God is relational.
Uh-huh.
So when he said, let us, Genesis 1:26, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and every other creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female. created he them. Okay. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over all the things. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Okay.
Hmm.
And then Genesis 2, it starts kind of reruns through the creation story. And on the seventh day, God rested. And then it talks about kind of how that all worked out. Um, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And how he planted the garden and what came out of the garden. Um, God put the man in the garden to dress it and brought all the animals before Adam and said, hey, name them. And he did. And then in verse 18, it says, and the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone.
Right.
I will make him a helpmeet for him. And out of the ground he formed every beast and brought them before Adam. Adam named them, and he said, but there's no helpmeet for Adam. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man.
Hmm.
And these people that are like, oh, I'm single, and you just need to accept in my singleness and all this other
Right.
bullshit.
Yeah.
No, God made us to be with a person of the opposite sex
Hmm.
for life.
Yeah.
Like that's how we were made.
Mhm.
Stop fighting against it.
Right.
Lean into it,
Yeah.
you know? But people don't want to hear it, you know? And there's a huge part because they think that it's going to control them. That they're going to lose out on things. Man, I'm telling you. Like you just take the sex, okay?
Hmm.
And the world puts out like, oh man, doing it with whoever, whenever, and wherever, man, that's the pinnacle.
Hmm.
You don't have a clue.
Right.
Like the satisfaction of being with your woman
Hmm.
and doing the deed,
Hmm.
you can't replace that,
Right.
And then on top of that, your heart isn't empty at the end
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, I gave her something, she gave me something. We're stronger because that's why we started calling it making love,
Right.
right? It's not just the physical pleasure, it's the hey, we grow closer together.
Hmm.
So when there's a study that I would like to see done, and it goes back to give not your strength to women.
Hmm.
When you're doing that to multiple women, you are losing your strength. You
Right.
are giving your strength away. I would like to see testosterone levels in a married man that's maybe having sex with his wife 2 to 3 times a week
Hmm.
versus somebody who's whacking off or with multiple partners
Right.
throughout the week. I would almost bet my gut is God
Hmm.
made human beings
Hmm.
so when a man and a woman that are married have sex together, his testosterone isn't going to go down like somebody who's beaten off to pornography.
Yeah.
I would like to see that test done. I don't have the means to do it,
Yeah.
but somebody's listening.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, let's do it
Be
because
interesting.
because I'm convinced that if we do things the way God intended us to do them,
Hmm.
we will be wildly healthier, wildly better, have better lives all across the board.
Right.
And man, if we could just get people to see that, but it's tough. God, the Bible says the God of this world had blinded the eyes of men, and then
Mhm.
like you don't need to be a religious person to see that that's going on.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm concerned that it's going to take some really catastrophic event to get people to snap out of where we're at
it's
now,
coming. It's
you know,
coming.
which is a horrible thing. And I don't
It
wish for
is.
that,
No.
but I don't see any other way that it's going to happen,
Yeah.
you know?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to the range. So you've
Yeah.
got that, and then you say you have like two or three other businesses
Yeah.
also,
So when I start talking about what I do, people are like, "Damn, you got a lot going on,"
right?
and I do. We've always been very active in my family. I joke that we're recovering workaholics, and
Yeah,
I've had to learn especially as I've gotten older, I can't do it all.
right.
So I've had to learn that. But so we farm. My brother and I farm the family farm together.
Mhm,
Um, and then my wife and I run a small trucking company.
mhm,
We also raise beef direct to consumer. That's what I brought you today.
right.
Um, and then my dad grows organic wheat,
Huh,
and I'm interested in getting kind of a line of that direct to consumer, especially as we're looking, kind of being prepared for that catastrophic event that is coming.
yeah,
We are going to see days when intermittent fasting is not an option. You will just be doing that,
yeah,
right? Um, and I want to try to build enough of a network that I can help people when that time comes,
right,
to, hey, I can sell you a 50-pound bag of wheat and you can grind it up at home and make food,
right.
or beer. I mean, at that point, you'd probably rather eat it than drink it,
Yeah,
but you're going to need some of both.
yeah,
Um, so, so we've got very heavy ag. Um, my dad's the property that the range is on is my dad's farm.
okay,
Um, it's when I tell people the acreage, they're always like, "Oh my gosh, that's huge." Well,
right.
in farms, that's not huge. Like
Yeah,
we farm for a big dairy over 5,000 acres
wow,
just to supply feed for this one dairy.
right,
Well, they actually have two dairies, and then they have to buy feed beyond what they grow
right.
to meet the needs of their herd. Um, so we've got 1,100 acres uh, where the range is on. It ranges on 10 acres of that. Um, and then we've got another 300 at a different location that my family bought when we first moved here.
Hmm.
Um, and so my brother and I farm that. We got a trucking company. My wife and I run a trucking company. We do direct to consumer beef, um, and the honey. And I'm trying to work in the wheat as well. And then starting to range.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
yeah, September 1st, we're doing open it to instructors to start booking dates for the fall and winter,
Hmm.
because no, not too many people want to train,
Yeah,
July and August.
it's a little more difficult to
It
get out
is,
there.
it is. And then December 1st, we're going to open it up to 50 members,
Okay.
and we'll probably run that for that first year and just see, hey, is the range getting used enough, or
Uh-huh.
is there dead spots that we could add some more members?
Right.
Because I've got two things. I I'm not going into debt for it.
Right.
I refuse to do that. So I'm building it out of my own income.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to keep my first two priorities are church safety teams. I want to have a place where church safety teams can come and train
Okay.
together,
Yeah.
because you're going to work together if shit hits the fan at church.
Right.
And then next priority is uh, training companies, because I want to get as many people into training as we can.
Right.
And that's one of Scott's um, points that he mentioned was, just the preparedness of the average citizen. Like,
Mhm.
you don't need to be law enforcement, you don't need to be military, you don't have to have that background. If you do, that's great. Like, we
Right.
want to learn from you people,
Right.
but you don't have to have that. Like, our country was founded on the average citizen being prepared.
Right.
Like we wouldn't be here today
Right.
if the average citizen wasn't prepared,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's been a little bit of a shift in the community. Like, hey, the guy that's and I think Lucas um,
Boykin.
Boykin
Yeah.
did Botkin, yeah,
Botkin.
T
Okay.
Rex Arms
Yeah. Yeah.
did a huge service to the community. He has no military background,
Yeah.
and he's training some of the like most elite dudes in the country,
Right.
you know? So like I think that did a really good thing of shifting, hey, the military guys can learn from the civilian guys,
Uh-huh.
you know? Now, vice versa, that probably most of the trainers have some sort of military or law enforcement background,
Hmm.
you know, and we want to learn that. But then there's also holes in their training that the civilian guys like, why do you do it that way? Because sergeant told me to do it this way,
Yeah.
you know, and they don't really put any thought into why they do what they do.
Right.
You know, not all of them, obviously, but so like the preparedness of the average citizen is why I want to do that. And then
Hmm.
just just talking in the community, like I was going to build the range just for me to have a range.
Right.
You know, I wasn't even thinking I'm going to make this a business. I'm going to, you know, make lots of money doing it.
Right.
That's not my goal. I don't need that.
Uh-huh.
Like, would it be nice? Sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to buy more guns and
Yeah.
ammo, you know, cool stuff.
Right.
But that wasn't my purpose going in. Is I want a range that I can use, and then I want to be able to bless people that are trying to get other people trained
Hmm.
because we are going to see hard times. We are going to see the time where the brown excrement hits the ventilating device. That's just we're going to see it,
Right.
you know, and that's been something that I felt God has put on my heart from when I was a little kid.
Hmm.
I mean, my dad wasn't into firearms. Like most of my growing up years, my dad owned a 410 and a 22. Like
Okay.
that was it,
Yeah.
you know? And I grew up reading Louis L'Amour books, you know, and
Right.
all the gunslingers in the old west and from my earliest recollection,
Mhm.
I felt like we need to be prepared.
Yeah.
Like something in me was like be prepared.
Right.
And for years and years, my dad and my brother and my family was kind of like, you're a little crazy there. Like, aren't you taking this a little far? And they still feel that way to an extent, but like my dad and my mom now
Uh-huh.
have kind of opened their eyes and be like, yeah, it's gonna get bad before it gets better,
Right.
you know? And and so you know, that's kind of what's driven
Hmm.
this, you know, is help other people get prepared,
Yeah.
you know, and then I want to open it for a certain amount of members, but I am going to keep it smaller than maybe is financially beneficial for me
Hmm.
because I want to meet those needs. I want to be able to, a trainer calls me, you know, and says, hey, I want to have classes. Okay. You know, we got the opportunity. Or I've heard horror stories of trainers showing up even at Cowtown and being like, hey, I reserved this bay 3 months ago. Oh, it's not available today,
Right.
you know, and they're like, well, you better make it available or I'm training in your parking lot, you
Yeah.
know? And but like I don't want to have that kind of business model,
Right.
you know? And I'm not a I don't consider myself a great business person.
Hmm.
I see a need that's something I'm interested in doing and I want to try to meet that need, you
Right.
know? And honestly, I can be pretty content. You know, obviously we all want more guns and ammo, right?
Right.
Suppressors and
Yeah.
cool stuff. But, you know, that's not my driver,
Hmm.
you know. And I think I'm being really honest
Right.
with that.
I think that's a good way to approach it
Yeah.
because then you're not creating something that you were no longer in control over that has actually become a detriment for you.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. If you ramp it up slowly and if there's the need and the desire, people will show up,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
it's been overwhelming
Yeah.
the interest and and in the community, you know, especially when I let off with unapologetically Christian,
Uh-huh.
pro-life, constitutional, all the things that should trigger everybody,
Right.
you know, and the amount of positive feedback from that
Uh-huh.
was very, very pleasantly surprising,
Right.
you know, and and but I want to say too, like I understand I understand people have made mistakes, so I'm no way saying, hey, because you made, you know, your girlfriend at one point got an abortion that all of a sudden, hey, I hate you now.
Right.
No, man, I'm on a journey. I've
Uh,
made mistakes. I've done things that I wish I could go back and do over,
Right.
you know? So I'm not judging on people's past. It's like recognize that mistake, like own it
Hmm.
and get better,
Right.
do better, like push ourselves. Let's get better,
Right.
you know? So that's that's what we all got to do, you know?
That's a good place to be in.
Yeah.
Um, so where exactly is it located?
So we're off of Highway 85.
Okay.
So I think you in one of your podcasts you mentioned Perryville.
Uh-huh.
So that's the Patterson Road prison. Is that correct? Or is
Um,
Perryville off of no, Perryville's off of Perryville Road and I-10.
okay.
So it's the Lewis prison that's
Yeah.
down on
Right.
Patterson. So we're basically straight west of the Lewis prison by about 2 miles.
Okay.
So if you're coming, you would take 85, you'd exit Patterson Road and head down Patterson Road, and there'll be signs. Like if there's an event, there'll be signs out saying range 2131.
Right.
Black and white sandwich signs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
As far as like the you selling direct to consumer for the beef and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
like how big of an operation is that and how much availability is there?
So since like pre-COVID, there was lots of availability.
Okay.
Post-COVID, I've sold out every year.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, people are waking up, and
Right.
that's a good thing. Like
Yeah.
people are like, oh, the grocery store doesn't actually make the food.
Yeah.
I should probably take this into my own hands a little bit.
Right.
People are like, I want a half a beef to put in my freezer.
Yeah.
I've got customers that buy a whole beef every year. I've got a customer that's got like 7 kids. He
Okay.
buys a whole beef every year and 2 whole pigs. And anytime I have extra available, I call him and he's like, yeah, I'll buy it.
There
It's
you
like,
go.
you kidding me? I got 7 kids to feed, and like
Right.
6 of them are boys.
Yeah.
So yeah, um, it's, I can scale,
Uh-huh.
I can get bigger.
Hmm.
Again, I don't like doing things. Yeah, I don't want to grow 20 animals and have send 3 of them to the auction because I lose my shirt, you
Right.
know? Um, I have a waiting list, basically, is how I run it.
I got you.
Somebody's like, hey, I'm interested. Okay, email me, you know,
Hmm.
and we'll get you on the list.
Right on. I'm
And
probably gonna hit you up on
that,
that because I've actually been looking for somebody that does that. That's here
okay,
locally.
locally, yeah, yeah.
There's lots of places around the
They'll
country,
ship it to you.
but
Yeah,
I really want to support Arizona. I
yeah.
want to support people that I know, because this is our community here, and
Yeah.
I think that that's
Um,
important.
and when that time comes,
Hmm.
you're not, you can't ship beef from Oregon
Right.
to here. Like, no, it ain't gonna work, you
Right.
know? So, I know, Anthony. I don't know if you know Anthony over at Desert, I think it's Desert Defense.
Mhm.
Um, he's been buying his bulk beef from a place in Oregon. And
Okay.
I don't know them. I don't have anything bad to say about them or anything.
Uh-huh.
My experience with people that do what I've done is they kind of tailor it to what people expect in the store.
Hmm.
And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, you want a half of beef? You're getting a half of beef. Like every cut that's out of that half of beef, you're getting,
Okay.
and if I have kind of a standard of
Uh-huh.
what I like for my family, and I've been doing this for, gosh, since I was 16. So I kind of know what people like, and
Uh-huh.
what they don't want to use. They're like, "What's this cut of beef? I've never seen it before. What do you use it for?"
Right.
And I'll try to help them, and they're like, "Oh no, just grind it next time." Okay, you know.
Yeah.
like I've got a lot of customers now, especially with families. They're like, I want steaks and ground beef. So
Right.
like your chuck roast, your round roast, all that
Uh-huh.
goes to ground beef because they're like, we eat hamburger. You
Right.
know, everything that we make with hamburger or steaks.
Right.
You know, I'm like, oh man, you're missing out. Like a chuck roast, dude. Like throw that joker in the
Uh,
crock pot, and you got a meal. You
yeah.
know, and you got one in there. So
Nice.
if you want some tips, I can give you some tips. But
I'm looking forward to that.
but um, yeah. So I sell it quarter, half a whole.
Okay.
I don't sell I don't sell individual cuts. You know, um, because then I have to go through a whole bunch of red tape, and it's all sold to you before it ever goes to the butcher. So basically, you're buying a quarter or a half or a whole steer,
Gotcha.
and
Huh.
that's just because of the red tape.
Right.
That's how I have to do it.
There you
So,
go.
and there's generally not a problem doing that.
Right.
You know,
And do you do poultry also, or just the beef?
I I have the interest in the poultry has not been as good,
Mhm.
um, because chicken in the store is so stinking cheap,
Yeah.
so stinking cheap. So like, what does it cost at Costco to buy a whole chicken?
Like $5.
Okay,
Yeah.
I sell whole chickens frozen,
Mhm.
processed for 30.
Okay.
So you can see why people are like, I don't want to buy it.
Right.
Well, chickens eat a lot,
Yeah.
and feed cost is a lot. And the big thing is chickens is nobody processes them here locally. Like I don't know anybody that processes chickens on a mass scale for any reasonable amount of money.
Right.
So like when I look at Costco selling chickens for $5, I'm like, God bless you, because I don't see how in the world you're doing it. You know, they've got to be losing money. Like it costs more than $5 a chicken to feed that joker
Right.
for its life. You
Uh-huh.
know, now what they're putting in it, I don't even want to
Right.
know what they're feeding it. I know what I'm feeding, and it's natural feed. I'm
Right.
not saying it's all organic and all non-GMO BS,
Right.
but it's good natural feed. I'm
Uh-huh.
not shooting them up with anything. I'm not, you know, giving them extra stuff to make them grow. Now, a meat bird doesn't need all of that.
Right.
Like meat, here's an interesting thing. A meat bird will literally eat itself to death.
Okay.
You have to feed them on a schedule,
Uh-huh.
or they will literally sit at the feeder until they can't walk, and they'll die because then they can't get to water and
Right.
whatever. So like they'll grow so fast that you
Yeah.
can't leave them on full feed.
Right.
So the last batch we did a meat we did like a hybrid bird it's good for meat, but you also can use it for laying.
Uh-huh.
And they didn't gain they gain nicely. They're nice, average is like 5 pound birds.
Mhm.
Um, but I think for the use of the feed, like I think I'm gonna go with the meat birds,
Right.
because you get them to that weight quicker and with less feed.
Mm.
Um, and hopefully that'll bring that price down. But I mean, where else can you go and feed your family for $30? Nowhere.
And really.
Yeah. I mean, I've got 4 kids, and
Right.
even to go to even to go to Culver's now cost me $100,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah. The cost of everything is absolutely
yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, we do have poultry. I
Mhm.
haven't excuse me. I haven't put that out as much. But my kids raise pigs,
Okay.
and so we do pigs and cows and poultry.
Right.
If somebody's interested in goat or something like that, my neighbor does goat.
Mm.
I'm not
Right.
going to get into goats.
Yeah. So who is it that does the bees or the honey?
That's my other neighbor.
Uh-huh.
Um, he is, man, what's his company name? he sells all of his most of his honey wholesale. So in
Okay.
55-gallon drums to a
Wow.
wholesale buyer down in Central Phoenix. And I went and talked to him. I was like, "Hey, man, like I would like to be able to offer this to my customers,
Hmm.
um, just as a hey, an add-on, you know."
Hmm.
And he's like, "All right, I'll jar up so many and I'll sell it to you for this price." And okay,
Right.
I can make that work. And Hector is his name. And so it's been kind of slow, but like all of my stuff, I just grow it word of mouth,
Right.
and eventually it takes off. And I've sold more honey this year than I have ever. You know, um, but what I offer that a lot of other farmers market type side of the road honey sellers,
Hmm.
and this comes from him, the guy that grows it,
Right.
that has the bees. He says majority of honey that's sold that way is cut up to 50% with high fructose corn syrup
Really.
because it comes down to selling it. It's per
Right.
pound, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, to really get good raw local honey, you've
Mhm.
got to buy it directly from the guy that's got the bees,
Yeah.
because most of the other stuff is, guys that are going down to the wholesale place and buying a 55-gallon drum and then filling jars. And
Yeah.
they don't want to sell just corn, just honey,
Yeah.
because they make less money. you
Right.
know Now, I'm sure there's exceptions to every rule,
Hmm.
right? That's just coming from him. That's not my opinion.
Right.
That's his understanding of the industry. So I buy it directly from him. He's already got it in jars,
Yeah.
and I take it out of the box and I
Right.
sell it to whoever wants to buy it.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I see like the guys that have like just a table with just like
Honey
blank
on, yeah,
blank jars of honey,
yeah,
and I always wonder, it's like, you're selling this little jar for like 10 or 20 bucks. It's like you could have just gone to the grocery store, paid 5 bucks and filled that up, and now you're selling it as
yeah.
real honey. It's like, how do I know where that
How
honey
do I
came from?
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
So,
that's the tough. So I mean, I think that goes back to the building community,
right.
like buying your stuff from people
Yeah.
and that we've got to get back to that
Mhm.
at some point.
Right.
Um, and yeah, yeah. So I sell those jars for $10. That's
Okay.
a half. That's a
Right.
pint. And I think that's, compared to what I've seen at some of the other places,
Right.
that's cheap.
Yeah.
Like most of those are going for 20. Oh, this is what I was going to say too is, so I've been I've been taking I've been using his honey
Mhm.
in I use a teaspoon
Uh-huh.
every morning in my coffee since like right before COVID. To my knowledge, I never had COVID.
Yeah.
Like I never lost my taste or smell. I think COVID was a bunch of BS anyway, but anyways, never had COVID,
Right.
and I haven't been sick since.
There you go.
I have not had a cold for like 2.5 years. And we live out where there's all kinds of ragweeds and alfalfa pollen and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But that's the benefit of
Right.
honey that's actually local to you,
Mhm.
is the bees are basically feeding you digested pollen,
Right.
which builds your immunity up
Mhm.
to for people that
Allergies.
struggle with
Yeah.
allergies,
Right.
you know. And I'm not going to say, hey, it's FDA approved and it's all this other stuff. That's just been my experience,
Right.
you know.
The FDA is one of those
Yeah.
organizations that needs to
That's a
go away.
joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to do an entire podcast just on those huge organizations. They're
Yeah.
all run by unelected officials that
Yeah.
are making all these rules with the power of law that should not exist,
Yeah.
or at the very least should be far, far smaller than
Make sure
that.
the EPA is on there too.
Yeah. The EPA, the
Yeah. They're
CDC, the
ruining,
FDA.
they
Yeah.
are ruining the trucking and the ag industry.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
with
The
all,
ATF for sure.
with all of their regulations on
Yeah.
diesel engines, holy
Yeah.
smokes. It's
So
crazy.
I don't remember what state it was in, but like you could get in more trouble for selling raw milk than you could for shooting somebody. It was just stupid,
Yeah,
like, it was ridiculous. Like, why is that a thing? It's like, why, you know, if somebody wants to drink that and they're willing to accept,
the
kind of the risk
risks.
factor of that,
Yeah,
you know,
which are very minimal.
yeah,
I grew up drinking raw milk straight out of the bulk tank.
right. And
Yeah,
there was a time for thousands of years before our society was built, and guess what?
they
They
drank
drank
raw
it just
milk.
like that,
Yeah,
and we're still here. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I want to give a shout out to the raw milk from Sprouts.
Okay.
I believe they only sell it in half gallon, and
Uh-huh.
it's like in the health food section. It has to be labeled health food because it can't be labeled milk.
Okay.
So it's one of those things in our state that needs to be changed. Like
Right.
you should be able to just go to the farmer and buy raw milk.
Yeah.
Should be it's pretty straightforward. You can't, but I actually met the dairyman that supplies all the Sprouts, at least in Arizona. I don't know about,
Uh-huh.
I don't even know if Sprouts is out of Arizona, but supplies the milk, like has the dairy, bottles it, delivers it to the Sprouts
Right.
himself or his team. Like he
Uh-huh.
doesn't outsource any of it. I actually met him last week,
Okay.
and so yeah, if you want
Nice.
raw milk, go to Sprouts and
There you go.
buy it half gallon.
Right on. Yeah. Eventually, like we live in a house now that's kind of just a general housing community, and I would like to do like some homesteading stuff. I'd like to
Yeah,
raise some chickens. I'd like to raise some bees. Pretty sure the HOA is not going to approve those
no,
sort of things,
not bees.
so
No,
it's going to be a little while.
chickens. Most HOAs you can have chickens as
Uh-huh.
long as you don't have a rooster,
Okay.
and you can have like five.
Right.
It's they limit you, but you can have some chickens.
Gotcha.
But you can't have a rooster for obvious reasons.
Right. Yeah, not everybody wants to wake up
So
that early.
yeah, check your regulations. But
Right.
man, I encourage as much as possible
Mhm.
be self sufficient in whatever area you're in. If you're in an
Right.
apartment, like you've got a balcony, get some hanging plants. Like do something to be self sufficient.
Right.
And uh, support the farmers in your area that are trying to go in that direction
Right.
because man the margins to grow, say wheat.
Mhm.
If you grow wheat commercially and you sell it on the open market,
Uh,
you're getting like 19 cents a pound.
okay.
If you grow it and sell it like direct to consumer, you can get like a buck 50 to $2 a pound.
That's quite a difference.
Yeah, well, it don't take very long to figure out at a buck 50 a pound, you can actually afford to develop your farm more and
Right.
make better choices and grow better food.
Right.
And you don't need to have all of the commercial chemicals or commercial fertile. You can do more stuff.
Uh-huh.
But yet in America, we've just wanted cheapest option, the
Right.
easiest and the cheapest option. Well, that's what's led to
Right.
the giant obesity problem that we
Mhm.
have and the health problems
Right.
and all the other stuff.
Mhm.
And, people like to blame the farmer. The farmer's just trying to survive,
Right.
you know. I mean, I've been in ag my whole life. My dad was in ag his whole life. My grandpa was in ag his whole life.
Uh-huh.
His dad was like I don't know of any of my ancestors that weren't farmers.
Mhm.
And a lot of them have folded, because they just couldn't get by selling their product in the conventional manner,
Right.
you know? And that's what's probably kind of driven me to be like, hey, build it from the ground up, build it word of mouth, build it direct to consumer,
Right.
because then the people get the direct good of the products that I create
Right.
and grow, you know? And that's really what it's all about,
Yeah.
you know?
And again, supporting our community
Yeah.
here, you know.
Supporting our community,
So,
like I was telling two of my neighbors that have been real consistent com- uh, customers of mine. And this last time I was like, hey, are you guys interested in pork? And they're like, yeah. you know? It's like, hey, just so you know, the price is considerably higher than it is in the store because by the time I feed the sucker and I get it processed, and I all my stuff is vacuum packed, so I pay a little extra for
Right.
that, because the customer, it's got a label on it. It looks nice. You can look through the package and be like, oh yeah, I want to eat that right now. you know,
Right.
uh, I'm like on pigs, we end up making $100 a head
Okay.
for 6 months worth of work.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've got 4 kids that do the feeding and take care of all that. But I mean, if you had to pay somebody to go and do that,
Right.
you're making zero money,
Hmm.
you know? And he was like, dang. He's like, how in the world is it fair that the farmer makes $100?
Right.
Well, if I'm selling like 40,000 pigs a year, that'd be all right.
Yeah. Right.
But when I'm selling 20,
Yeah.
it's a little different story, And I'm doing it as a because I want to.
Hmm.
I'm doing it because it's good for my kids to learn
Right.
how to raise a product and sell it,
Right.
take care of an animal, get it to market, you know, market your product. Um, but, when people begin to understand, like, oh, okay, when we go this other route, you have to have these massive farms. You have to have all this massive industry that ends up getting us a subpar product
Hmm.
if we want it cheap,
Right.
you know? And generally they're like, "Oh, yeah, I understand. No, we want to keep buying it."
Yeah.
Even though it's more than what we can go buy it in the store,
Right.
you know? But then when you get them to eat it,
Hmm.
like this was the first year they bought bacon. They
Hmm.
bought a pig and they got the bacon. He was like, "Dude, that bacon was phenomenal."
Right.
I'm like, "Thank you."
That's
So
awesome.
at that point, I know I got him hooked,
Right.
right?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who doesn't love bacon?
Yeah, even the vegetarians love bacon.
Right.
Yeah. They just don't say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny story. Uh my brother's in-laws, they run the meat shop in it's down on Lower Buckeye between 7th and Central,
Hmm.
called the meat shop. And when they were getting started, they'd go to farmers markets and like build up. And my brother's mother-in-law was there and she's like, "Hey, try a bacon sample, it's really good." It's, telling them, kind of selling it.
Right.
And this guy walked by and she's like, "Hey, come have a piece of bacon." He's like, "Oh, I'm a vegetarian." She's like, "Well, vegetarians love bacon too," just kind of off the cuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, "How did you know?" He's like, "That's my weakness."
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. One of God's greatest blessings
Yeah.
is bacon.
Yeah. I'm glad we're no longer under the Jewish law,
Yeah. Right.
because bacon would be one that I'd
Yeah.
have to break.
That's it out.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I definitely want to be respectful of your time, and I greatly appreciate you making the trip out here because I know it was a little bit of a haul for you.
Yeah, no worries.
It was great talking with you. I'm especially glad that I have you now as a contact because I really do want to like start buying some of the beef
Sure.
and kind of get more familiar with what you do.
Yeah.
Um, I get like the contact information for like the range and for Sword and Trowel
Yeah.
and for other businesses and like make sure and put links and stuff like that in there
Okay.
for people and any way that I can to help drive business your way, anything that you want me to help because not that I do a ton of the social media stuff, but I probably do a little bit more than you.
Yeah.
Anything at all that I can help with, like just reposting things or sharing things, whatever,
Sure.
by all means, just let me know.
Yeah.
You know.
So on Instagram, we're at range_2131,
Uh-huh.
and same on X at range_2131. And then our email is range2131@gmail.com
Okay.
for any trainers that are interested in getting um, set up or getting classes booked.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I prefer they email us. And yeah, that's the beef and all that is just my phone number.
Yeah.
You know,
All
Give me
right.
a call, shoot me a text. I
There you
like text because
go.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
All right, brother. Well,
yeah.
it was great to meet you,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Thanks for having
looking
me on.
forward to keeping more in contact with you
Yeah, you
as
betcha.
this goes. All right.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, you can now support the Non-Victim Nation by donating via listener support directly on Spotify. Remember, the story of your life is being written right now, and you are the hero.